I love those dear hearts and gentle people.
I've discussed the institution of Work for the Dole before, mainly concerning efforts at volunteering reform in Tasmania and the still unresolved clash between Work for the Dole and the practice of volunteer work. But there is another issue pertaining to Work for the Dole that should be addressed in light of the federal government's extensive revision of the program. I assert that Work for the Dole should expand to include some of the private sector. Rachel Brown, writing for the Sydney Morning Herald, reports that the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry is lobbying the federal government to extend the Work for the Dole program, which currently covers not-for-profit organisations and government agencies, to small businesses. These Work for the Dole participants would be paid from the public purse as a way of addressing youth unemployment. The Australian Bureau of Statistics stated in a May 7 media release that Australia's unemployment rate rose to 6.2% in April 2015 from 6.1% in March, with an alarming 12-year high of 6.4% between December 2014 and January 2015, according to Adam Creighton of the Australian Business Review. Right now, the Trading Economics website's figures show that there are approximately 769,500 Australians looking for work, and Trading Economics and the ABS both corroborate a decrease in available full-time work. The current unemployment rate of 6.1% is relatively low, but Brown cites an ABS finding of the youth unemployment rate being 14.2%. This is the highest youth unemployment rate since 1998 and is over double the unemployment rate of people over the age of 25. The Work for the Dole program is intended to alleviate the unemployment problem by placing participants in the workforce, or the voluntary not-for-profit workforce at least, and enabling them to gain skills and experience that will make them more employable in the future. Australian Council of Social Service Chief Executive Cassandra Gold, quoted in a Sydney Morning Herald article by Judith Ireland, proclaimed that creating opportunities for those looking for paid work, supporting them to develop new skills, and linking them with real employers and real jobs must be at the heart of the government's welfare reform and employment agenda. However, much like the disconnect between Work for the Dole and volunteer work itself, the volunteer sector and the paid workforce essentially exist on separate planes of the economy. The federal government's Department of Employment website describes certain rules that must be followed in Work for the Dole. The emphasis is on individual places with host organizations, the section begins. There are limitations on the type of work job seekers can do, with an example being no caring, teaching, or direct supervision roles. To clarify, the page stresses that Work for the Dole places will not be offered in private sector businesses, and places must not involve tasks which would normally be done by a paid employee, or interfere or detract from a paid worker's experience. The page lists various Work for the Dole positions such as charity op-shops, administrative duties in not-for-profit organizations, which is roughly what I'm doing for Eastern Volunteers, gardening or maintenance activities in public areas, and restoration of community facilities. But a term that stuck out for me in the Department of Employment's Work for the Dole overview was work-like. Work for the Dole activities provide eligible job seekers with work-like experiences which help job seekers to learn new skills and improve their chances of finding a job, the overview declares. While group activities are still permitted, the priority is on finding individual work-like places. That term, work-like, emphasizes the distance in functionality between Work for the Dole and the paid workforce. Once again, I am very happy and lucky in my own experiences with Work for the Dole, as my placements will translate into tangible value for my future employment. These video essays are essentially journalism experience, and my ticket sale work for the Yarra Valley Tourist Railway counts as retail experience. Of course, plenty of jobs will confer equivalent skills for unrelated jobs. When I applied for a job with a party hire business last year, I asserted that my film review work is equivalent to experience in marketing, as it involves persuasive language and weighing up of information. The employer agreed with me and seemed rather impressed. It's a damn good thing I didn't get the job, though, as it turned out to be a scam, but that's beside the point. In most jobs, paid or volunteer, you will receive a taste of teamwork, goal-based activities, quotas, deadlines, brand awareness, protocol, and other useful qualities. The feeling of working productively as part of a system is no doubt satisfying for plenty of Australians, whatever the task or whether you are directly paid or not. Federal Assistant Employment Minister Luke Hartsukier believes, as recounted in an SBS website article by Michael Kenny, that the scheme, Work for the Dole, would aim to give unemployed Australians the basic skills to get a job. Hartsukier says that many skills that people in work take for granted, such as turning up on time every day, coming dressed presentably, and so forth, some job seekers don't have those skills, and Work for the Dole is a great way of imparting what they call the soft skills onto people who are looking for work. But Kenny notes the federal opposition's disagreement, as they insist that Work for the Dole does not provide the long-term skills the unemployed need to stay in the job market. These soft skills are undeniably useful for instilling good work ethic, but on the important practical side of things, if you don't want to work in retail, admin, IT, gardening, or community maintenance, then Work for the Dole will have little constructive benefit for you beyond character building. Kenny brings up the anxiety migrant and Indigenous organizations have over New Start recipients being forced to complete tasks like rubbish collection and park maintenance as part of efforts to make them more employable. Ireland states the ACOS's statement that the government's high-profile Work for the Dole policy has little or no impact on people's job prospects, with a June 2014 survey showing that only 19% of those in the scheme had a job 3 months later. Kate Carnell, Chief Executive of the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, warned that we think there's a very real chance that unless the youth unemployment issue is addressed, and it will need to be addressed quite aggressively, that we will end up with a generation of young people on the fringes of the economy. Work for the Dole would be a less than optimal solution for many unemployed people, and this is precisely what the ACCI wishes to remedy by expanding Work for the Dole into the private sector. Setting aside the paid work subsets of full-time, part-time, and casual, one could say that there are 3 types of work in the context of Centrelink: paid private work, unpaid volunteer work, and Work for the Dole as a blurry, government-paid midpoint. But Work for the Dole in the private sector would be a 4th kind of work, and would be highly constructive for young unemployed people in the New Start system. Instead of getting people on Work for the Dole programs to pick up papers and the like, the program should be expanded into small businesses, where the participants could learn some skills, Carnell said. Even if it's just learning how to make a coffee or serving customers, that would make them more employable. We think that could be a real win for young people. If a Work for the Dole participant could be placed in a for-profit store, a cafe, a factory, craft or trade position, or local cinema, this would confer to the participant practical skills and experience far more consistent with the real-world private sector. This model would also benefit small to medium businesses because the participant would be paid by the government, and it would boost the reputation of those businesses by creating an image of those businesses as accommodating and willing to help the unemployed. As with any volunteer work, Work for the Dole participants should not replace existing paid staff. Work for the Dole in the private sector would simply allow participants to enter work vacancies that they would ordinarily have significant difficulty being selected for, as there are far more job seekers than vacancies. These registered small to medium businesses would be expected to provide a level of training and skills development. To avoid businesses exploiting participants and treating them as free labor, the government should give these businesses a generous subsidy or tax return only if they hire the participant for a proper job once his or her Work for the Dole period has concluded. Businesses shouldn't have to hire Work for the Dole participants, but they must give legitimate reasons for not hiring the participant. Failing to hire a participant multiple times for no good reason may result in a penalty. Though it must be regulated to prevent abuse, I can see expanding Work for the Dole into the private sector as a very beneficial course of action. Placing a Work for the Dole participant in a smaller for-profit business would deliver viable, practical work skills far more effectively than the current model. This would offer an alternative to the not always adequate work-like positions on offer, and would thus do much to relieve Australia's unemployment situation in the long term. Ultimately, this idea would infuse more of the work so many young Australians need into Work for the Dole.